So let's start with that. A few other immigration topics to go through. Reaction?
Well, look, this is a policy that's been put in place to try to avoid there being a chilling effect, right? We want people to feel free to take their kids to school. We want people to be able to go to the hospital if they need urgent medical care. So the idea was that because the thought that ICE might grab you when you go to the emergency room, we should ban ICE presence there so as to give people reassurance that they're not going to be arrested if they run to the emergency room. Look, I think some of this is it's not going to drive up the total number of ICE arrests by eviscerating this policy. But I do think what's kind of going on here, Connell, is the desire to create a climate of fear whereby you create more of a chilling effect to probably encourage undocumented populations to leave the country in the first place.
Some reports were seeing that before Trump comes in. I mean, you think you'll see more of that? People getting out early or leaving early?
I don't know. I think this population has really been in this country a long time. I mean, but 75% of the people have been here since at least 2007. And you and I have talked about this a bit. Yeah. They're integrated, with U.S. citizen families. You have 4.4 million U.S. citizen children who have an undocumented parent. So I don't think it's necessarily easy for that undocumented population that's inside the country to just pack up their things and leave. I imagine people are going to wait it out. But look, I know this rhetoric is creating obviously a lot of fear in the immigrant community, so certainly some are going to depart.
I said there were some other immigration-related headlines. Here's one from the New York Times. The recent immigration surge has been the largest in U.S. history. About 60% of immigrants who've entered the country since 2021, beginning of the Biden administration, have done so without legal authorization. This was from a Goldman Sachs report, but in other words, this is the worst we've ever seen during the Biden administration. What would you say about that in terms of context, if anything?
Connell, I think what it highlights is we went through a fundamental, an incredibly unprecedented event at our border of the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. To be fair, during the Biden administration, with the new asylum rule, the numbers dropped. A lot of that is also attributable to Mexico. But look, at the end of the day, this is probably one of the leading reasons for this election, right? People saw these images night after night of tens of thousands of migrants flooding across our border. And people that's going to be incredibly difficult, even with the Trump administration's mass deportation plan, right, to remove people. And I think that, I'm not surprised by the New York Times data. I mean, we saw it every night, but it just kind of brings it all together for what a massive...
Well, that'll be the legacy, though, right, John, of this Biden administration? Not that the numbers went down at the end when they finally acted, but that they waited and that he, as the president, waited way too long to take action, right? That's the legacy on immigration.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, look, at the end of the day, there's a lot of different things that we've talked about before. The immigration system is massive, it's complex, but that border is what defines success or failure. And I think you're right. At the end of the day, the judgment is in. I think the American people were very disturbed by what they saw night after night and the inability of the United States to enforce the rule of law at our border. And I think, look, I understand people's frustration. You have to be able to enforce your laws and maintain the integrity of your borders.
All right, here's the last thing, because this plays into it as well, because just because all of that is true doesn't mean it's going to be smooth sailing from here on out with the Trump administration coming in and the mass deportations and everything else. What about execution? What about the effect on people and families and on the economy? Senior fellow at the American Immigration Council testifying at a Judiciary Committee, Aaron Reichlin-Melnick, said this. Watch.
Efforts to ramp up deportations would sweep in tens of thousands of people each year who have no or minimal criminal legal system contact. We know this because this is what happened during the first Trump administration. Mass deportations would also cause economic chaos. As millions are expelled, the U.S. population and labor force would shrink. So too would the economy. Prices would rise in sectors with significant undocumented workforces.
Okay, any or all of that true concerns for you, someone who knows this pretty well?
Look, every migrant comes here because there's jobs available, right? 98% of the migration in this country, 99%, is economically based, right? There's opportunity in America, there's a demand. We have an immigration system that has never created, visa categories or pathways for people to legally come here. So the demand for labor far outstrips the available number of visas. Obviously, there will be economic consequences if we were to pull off the mass deportation as it's being described. Now, Connell, again, though there are substantial hurdles to the administration for being able to pull this off, and if you look back at the original Trump administration, I mean, I heard his reference to it, but the reality is the numbers were actually pretty paltry, right? Only about 250,000 deportations in a year, certainly below the Obama administration. So, look, I think a lot remains to be seen how all this is going to play out. Obviously, they're going to need a tremendous infusion of resources over at ICE and CBP to come anywhere near what they're talking about. But certainly if you reduce the population or if you got rid of 11 undocumented migrants in this country, they're all employed here, there will be economic consequences.
All right, John, as always, thanks. We always appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks so much for watching. Just go to joinnn.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.